I'm really thankful to Will for filling in for me in such a good way last week. I was with the Midway congregation in Jasper, and I was glad to be able to be with them. And Will came in. I'm just going to admit it. He came in last minute. I didn't give him a whole lot of heads up, so I really appreciate his filling in for me. And I listened to the lesson this afternoon. It was excellent. So we're going to pick up where he left off. And I know you've seen this chart before, but this is the course we're following in our study of Christian love. And we started talking about where it all comes from. The source is God, and He's revealed His love to us in a variety of ways, namely the cross, but in other ways as well. And having seen that love, we have to open our hearts to it and accept it. This got us into a number of qualities of love that were very challenging. The courage of love, the risk that love takes, the boldness of love, the selfless nature of love. You might remember going through that definition of love from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Very challenging things. It's not the love of the world. Christian love is unique and it is special. Now, Will ended class last week talking about love perfected. Well, this chart demonstrates that in the cycle, because now that love has come down to us, we are meant to reflect it back to God. And love is not perfect, and we don't have that confidence from it until it is reflected back. And this reflection of love moves through a number of relationships. And you talked about the first of these last week. We're going to flesh that out even more tonight, and that is our relationship with God. First and foremost, He loved us, and now we love Him. How do we do that? And are we doing that? You ran through 4 tests in 1 John to see. And so you've been through that examination. And hopefully you're in a good place tonight to think about loving God some more and what that means in your life. So the way we're going to think about it tonight is in terms of ordering your love. That's the title for tonight's lesson, Ordering Your Loves. And we get this idea from a question posed to Jesus in Matthew chapter 22. If you will, turn your Bibles to Matthew 22. I've got a little of it on the slide back here, but we need to get a little context because this begins on a day when Jesus is being questioned insincerely from a number of people who are trying to trap Him. And He has skillfully answered their questions. He's just fielded a question from the Sadducees, and now a scribe comes forward to bring in the debate over the greatest command. I'm told this is something scribes debated all the time amongst the Jews. And so they wanted Jesus' opinion, and having, if they're able to get him saying something controversial, they can discredit him. So Matthew 22, verse 36 has the scribe ask him, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" And Jesus answers the question. Now, if there wasn't a good answer to the question, He wouldn't answer it, right? You remember when some people came up and asked about the baptism, when He asked them about John's baptism, whether it was from heaven or from men, and they wouldn't answer His question, and He said, "Well, I'm not going to answer your question." So when they're not asking a fair question, He doesn't answer it. And they may have thought this was a trick question, but it actually has an answer. And we know the answer. The greatest commandment is this, verse 37. "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets." Now note the language that is used here. There's a first commandment, there's a second commandment. He's ordering loves, prioritizing loves. And here's the main idea of this lesson. We love many things, and we do not love anything the same. We love many, many things, but we don't love anything the same. They are in a hierarchy. They are ordered. There's someone or something at the top of the list, and there's someone or something at the bottom of the list. And there are many things that we simply don't love. That's the idea. And it's a very powerful idea. And if you want to know, we'll get into this more in a moment, but just to introduce the idea, if you want to know what it is that's at the top of your list, don't listen to the words you say or even the thoughts that you think, but check out your actions. All right? Your actions will tell you the order of your loves. It's like that old story about the guy at the Super Bowl sitting on the 50-yard line with an empty seat next to him. And during halftime, this guy that was way up high in the stands on the end zone, he walks over and he says, I've been watching you. You've got this empty seat next to you. And he said, yeah, that's actually my seat. It belonged to my wife. She passed away. He said, oh, I'm so sorry. He said, yeah, we never missed a Super Bowl. And she's gone now. And the man said, well, couldn't you talk a friend or a relative into coming and taking her seat? And he said, no, they're all at the funeral. So his order of loves became very apparent at the Super Bowl game. I don't think y'all knew that was going to go in that direction. It's a little twist for you tonight to wake you up. If you want to know what's first on your list, look at your actions, not your words, not your thoughts. So Jesus says this is the proper order. Number 1, love God. Number 2, love your neighbor as yourself. And on these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So let's think about this, starting here with God saying, love me first. Okay, we're going to talk in the first place about a jealous God. That's not my wording. I would never use that wording if he had not used it himself. But God reveals that he is a jealous God. Let's look at a few verses. Turn in your Bibles to Exodus chapter 20, where the 10 commandments are revealed. Exodus chapter 20. The first 2 commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. That's the first commandment. Second commandment. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Striking, isn't it? So, what does he mean to say here? Well, let's look at a few other verses to get some context. And we'll go all the way over to Isaiah. And there's a lot said in Isaiah because by this time, Israel has begun to entertain idol worship. Despite all the warnings against it and those 2 commandments we just read, Israel has invited idols into their land. And now the Lord, who is real, is having to compete with false gods. So these passages from Isaiah address that. Isaiah 23:9. The Lord of hosts has purposed it to defile the pompous pride of all glory, to dishonor all the honored of the earth. That could be kings, that could be false gods, that could be teachers who oppose the Lord. Anybody upheld in honor, God says, my honor dishonors everyone else. And just imagine a mere mortal saying something like this. But this is the Lord. Now, here's Isaiah 42, verse 8. I am the Lord, that is my name, my glory I give to no other, nor my praise to carved idols. He mentions idols specifically here, but in that statement, my glory I give to no other, you see again a reflection of the first two commandments. No other gods before me, no carved images. I'm a jealous God. One last passage, Isaiah 48, verse 11. For my own sake I do it. So he is promoting himself. That's what he's saying here. How should my name be profaned? My glory I will not give to another. So this is the jealousy of God. Now, one of the reasons we struggle with this concept is we're not very familiar with proper jealousy. We know jealousy because we have it in ourselves all the time. And in us, jealousy is really ugly. It is a very ugly thing. Because jealousy says, I'm the greatest, I'm the best, I deserve honor, and she doesn't. I deserve honor, not him. And we are never at the top. As human beings, there's always somebody better. There's always somebody greater. And so the best attitude for us is humility, not pride. The jealousy of God is different. Now, for one thing, you can't see this in the English, but when jealousy is ascribed to God, a different word is used there than is used of human jealousy. The word we read in Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, is never used of a human being. So that helps a little. This is a different kind of jealousy. Still, it's jealousy. It's God saying, I am greedy with my own glory, if I might go so far as to say that. But it's a good jealousy. It is a good greed, if I could use that word, just to get your attention to what it is, because God properly stands at the top. He is the greatest. He is the only all-sufficient one. He is worthy of all glory and all honor, and no one else comes anywhere close to Him. And that's reality. And it's best for us to get in line with reality. Now, when we walk around with our heads puffed up and strutting around and promoting ourselves and bragging, we're not dealing with reality. In fact, deep inside we know that. It's usually those who are deeply insecure that boast and brag the most, right? We're not dealing with reality when we are jealous. When God's jealous, with this kind of jealousy, it's the closest to reality we can get. It is reality. He is the greatest. He deserves first place in our hearts. So He's a jealous God. But it's not to be confused with human envy.
God was creator of all. What is man creator of?
Exactly. The Creator, and we're all the creatures, right? Now, Jesus said, love the Lord your God first with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Now, He's repeating a commandment from Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 6. The qualities there are heart, soul, and might, I believe. And in Mark's account, he adds strength, which is equal to might. And so I want to think about these 4 ways, when you put all the accounts together, we're to love God. The 4 parts of us we're to love God. And I'm not even sure if we should distinguish them one from another, because it could be that Jesus is just saying, love God with your entire being. In fact, that is what He's saying. With your whole being, with every fiber of your being, love God first. Don't let just any little part of you even entertain loving another before Him. But if we were to distinguish these terms, we could look at it as maybe working all the way down through the human person from top to bottom or from greatest to least. I was thinking about this today. The heart is your entire inner being. So God wants to capture your heart. That's not just your emotions, which is how we usually think of the heart. That's your emotions, that's your thoughts, and that's your will, your volition, your decision making. So that's your whole inner being. And then within that is your soul. The Greek word for soul is psyche. And we use soul and spirit interchangeably. There may be a slight difference between that. Soul could be your life essence. Okay, this word psyche can be applied to animals that don't have an immortal spirit. So it's like your life essence, your breath, a lot of times is the metaphor for that. I think of it as the biological processes that are running you, that keeping your body. Those are mysterious processes, right? I mean, how does life come into a person? It's a great debate that we have regarding abortion and at the end of life, euthanasia. Where does life begin? Where does life end? I believe life begins at conception. And I believe God, the Creator, is the one that decides when life ends. But if you've ever been with somebody who's passed away and you've seen that last breath, something leaves that body besides the spirit. We know that, but we can't see the spiritual. We see that last breath. That's the soul leaving the body, the psyche, Hebrew word nephesh. That is it's subject to the heart. And then below that is your mind. Your thoughts are a part of your heart, and they shape your life. Bring that into submission to the love of God. And then last, and probably least, is the part you focus on the most, your physical body, your strength, your physical power. Bring all of that in submission. If your heart's straight, then your soul, your mind, and your strength will fall in line. There's an order there. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the meaning we need to take home with us is Jesus is saying, number one, above all things, love God with every fiber of your being. That's what he means to say. And then second is like unto it, meaning if you truly love God, you're going to do this next one. Love your neighbor as yourself, quoting Leviticus 19:18. Jesus says this also, that on these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. Now, he might be doing something clever there because, as I said, the scribes were obsessed with counting commands. And they had counted 613 commandments in the old law. And they divided those up into 365 negative and 248 positive. And they came up with light commands and heavy commands and categorized them all the time. And then that went into all kinds of traditions and interpretations of the commands. They were constantly obsessing over categorizing commands. The spirit of the law, though, had been lost upon them. And Jesus says, you've come up with 613. Let me give you two that will sum the whole thing up. And if you do these two, if you remember these two, you're doing all the rest of them. Love God, love your neighbor. The thing is, a lot of them were observing 613 commands in futility because they didn't love God and they didn't love each other. And that's called legalism. Law without love is legalism. Paul said the same thing in Romans 13, verse 10. Love is the fulfilling of the law. So number one tonight, here's what I want you to understand in this discussion of ordering loves. God must come first. You love many things, and you do not love anything the same. God says, I should be first. All right? Any comments or anything anybody wants to say there? All right, let's go on to the second thing. Now, from there, I want to get into the idea of disordered loves. We know this is a problem for us. Otherwise, Jesus wouldn't be stressing it. This doesn't come natural to many of us, to put God first. It's hard work for a lot of people. Life gets mixed up, and our loves get turned upside down. And so the order of your loves defines you. The order of your loves says more about who you are than maybe anything else. Even what you mentally subscribe to, the teachings that you mentally profess to believe in. When you look at your loves, that's who you really are. Now, this idea goes back to the Bible, of course, but there's an early Christian who fleshed that out quite a bit named Augustine. And I want to read to you, Augustine talked about this throughout his whole life. And this is just one quotation out of many on ordering your loves. And believe it or not, this is the clearest one I could find. So some of them are a little harder to understand than this. He says, "But living a just and holy life requires one to be capable of an objective and impartial evaluation of things. To love things, that is to say, in the right order, so that you do not love what is not to be loved." He's going to develop that a little more. "Or fail to love what is to be loved, or have a greater love for what should be loved less, or an equal love for things that should be loved less or more, or a lesser or greater love for things that should be loved equally." And so that's from his work on Christian doctrine. That's Augustine. So this language, not the concept, but the language of ordering your loves really comes down to us from Augustine. And I think he's onto something here. We need to take a look at our lives and see what order our loves are in, because it's very possible that they are out of order, and that creates a problem. Jim made a comment a while ago that reminds me of this passage that I think I have here, Romans 1:25. In the book of Romans, Paul is indicting the whole world of sin. He starts with the Gentiles, and describing the Gentile sin, he says of them that they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator. You see the disorder? We've got the creature at the top and the Creator below. That's the wrong order. You have more than one love, and your loves are in some kind of an order. There are probably things you love too much, things you love too little, and there are probably things that you should love that you don't love at all. That's the idea here. Now somebody says, well, I can love God and this other thing that's very important to me equally. Well, the Bible takes issue with that. Look at Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. Jesus warns us about materialism. No one can serve two masters. Now, he hasn't gotten specific yet as to who those masters are. I think that statement can stand on its own. Maybe materialism isn't your problem. Maybe it's something else. Maybe you like to have a lot of attention. Maybe there's a particular person in your life that you make equal to God in terms of influence in your life. Whatever it is, you're serving one above the other. He goes on to say, he will either hate the one and love the other, that is hate by comparison, because second place is so far below first place when it comes to love. There's only one who captures your heart. There's only one spot for that. And so it's almost as if you hate the second one because you love the first one so much. You will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. What comes first? The money or the Lord? Would you be like the widow with 2 mites and give every last dime you had? That kind of devotion shows where her love was. Nobody has any question where her love was. Here's another passage that you talked about last week, 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. I think this is a very important passage for us to be hearing today, because I think we're trying to have our foot in the world and the church at the same time. This is what we're doing. Have you heard about the Colossus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world? I believe, if I've got this one right, that the Colossus stood 1 leg on each bank of a stream. This enormous thing. And that's how a lot of us are trying to stand. And John says, you'll fall. You can't stand that way. And here's why. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. I love John because he doesn't mince words. He's like, no, I'm not going to listen to it. If you love the world, you're not loving the Father. It's one or the other. Well, John, I go to church on Sunday, and I even come in on Wednesday night. But I got these other things going on too. It's one or the other. Which one is it? All that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. Now look at why this doesn't work. What's happening to the world? The world is in the process of passing away. Now, I think Will pointed out, world here is a system. I forget the terminology used, but we're not just talking about the earth here, although the earth is passing away. But we're talking about a system here that is outside of Jesus Christ. And it's passing away. It's crumbling along with its desires. Whoever does the will of God abides forever. So if you're standing with 1 leg on one cliff and 1 leg on the other cliff, and you got 1 leg on a good cliff, it's solid, it's made of rock, it's granite, it's not going anywhere, but the other cliff is crumbling, does it matter that you've got 1 foot on a good spot? It doesn't matter that 1 foot is secure. If the other foot's not secure, you're going to fall. That's what John is trying to tell us. You can't love 2 things equally at the top. Now, somebody might argue, well, I have 5 children and I love them all equally. Well, I'm sure you do. But we're talking about the number 1 slot. Okay? And when it comes to the number 1 slot, it's either going to be God or it's going to be something else. But God's not going to share that spot. So what is the order of your loves? And how do you know it? Well, I think the 4 tests that you talked about last week from 1 John are very helpful, and so is this passage of Scripture from Matthew 6. Let's turn over to Matthew 6. We've already been in verse 24. Let's go back and look at verse 19 through 21. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. And what's a treasure? What do you think of when you think of a treasure?
Well, people might think of like a home, a great home, or homes,
Yes.
cars, fame.
Some people treasure their possessions, right? Fame, that's another good example. They treasure their public persona.
I think of a trunk with gold coins.
That, you may be joking, but that's exactly what I was thinking of too. Something you store up, you put a lock on it, you might bury it in the earth, but you keep it secure, you keep it safe, and you put your most priceless things in there. a treasure chest, right? So you can appreciate the fame and the possessions, but when you treasure them up, you store them up in the most important place, which is your heart, right? That's where we treasure things. So he says, don't put earthly things in your treasure chest, your heart. Verse 20, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Wherever you're putting your treasure, that's where you're putting your heart. And if it's on earth, your heart is bound to this earth. If it's in heaven, it's bound to heaven. And you just look, where's my treasure? Where's my time? Where are my resources? Where's my money going? Where's my energy going? That's probably the most telling one. What would I exhaust myself doing and never run out of... Well, if you exhaust yourself, you run out of steam. That doesn't make any sense. What would I just love to do all day long without stopping? And the answer to that question tells you what you love the most. What do you love the most? That's a hard question to ask, right? It's a tough question to ask. But we need to ask it because the answer will tell us if our loves are disordered. And disordered loves result in unhappiness and a lack of fulfillment in this life. So we've talked about a jealous God, disordered loves. How do you fix the problem? Let's say your life is mismatched, your loves are upside down, your priorities are all out of order. What do? We'll close thinking about new beauties. I borrowed that phrase from Timothy Keller in his book on preaching. He says, when your priorities are mixed up, you need new beauties. In other words, I like that because where we started in this class talking about beauty as a way to encounter God. We need to find God beautiful again, or maybe for the first time in our lives. We need to find His righteousness beautiful. We need to find His mercy beautiful. Sometimes it's hard to see, and sometimes, the most unlikely thing is getting in the way of that. Sometimes problems at church get in the way of that. If that's true for you, you're not unusual. This has happened to a lot of people. Problems happen in the church, outside the church. Maybe family is getting in the way of that. Maybe been blinded by greed. Most certainly by whatever idols are in your life. Whatever it is, you need to go back to the drawing board, love God first, love your neighbor as yourself, and find new beauties. Now, 3 things on how you can do that. Number 1, you cannot improve your spiritual situation by merely changing your will. I'm not talking about your last will and testament. I'm talking about willpower here. Okay, now, I'm talking to myself here. Preachers try this all the time. We get up and we need to get a response, right? So we put people on a guilt trip, or we try to change their will immediately. And we go for the decision-making part of their inner person. And sometimes you get results from that. Let's say, people need to give more. And so we roll out the sermon on giving and just shame people about how little they've been giving. Some of you are laughing because you've heard these sermons before, just really rake them over the coals. Show them pictures of disaster areas and all this, just really make them feel terrible. And you might get the contribution up that one day, but you've all been through these things. What happens the next week, next month? It's back down to where it was. Because you went after the will instead of the love. It's like a New Year's resolution. That's all about willpower. Oh, it's the new year, January 1st. It's just it's another day. But January the 1st, the slate is clean. No, it's not. You got 40 plus years of junk behind you. There's no clean slate. The day you're born, you get a clean slate, and then from then on, it's all messed up. But we do this thing, we have this myth of the new year. I'm going to set New Year's resolutions. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to read my Bible more. I'm going to pray more. I'm going to stay in touch with my family better. And what happens in February? The willpower runs out because there's nothing behind it but just bootstrap energy. I'm going to just pull myself up by my own bootstraps. It doesn't work. Okay, so you can't do it just by changing your will. You can't do it just by changing your feelings. Okay, back to the preachers. This is where the preacher tells a story. It's a sad story. It's not like my Super Bowl story. Sad story. Play on the emotions a little bit. Does that get a response sometimes? Yeah. Is it a lasting response? Not usually. How many of you have seen a movie that just really moved you, or heard a song or a piece of music that just really moved you, and in that moment where you're listening or you're watching, you decide you're going to change something fundamental to you? Maybe it's a book you've read. I've heard people say, that book changed my life. How do you just read a book one time and it changed your life? Now, the Bible changes your life when you're in it daily. That book changed my life. Nobody really means that when they say that. Now, maybe it changed your perspective on things, but it's not getting to the core because it might have moved your emotions, and the needle might have moved just a little bit, but it goes right back to where it was. So what do? The real key to change is reshaping the heart. Because what the heart wants most, the mind finds reasonable, the emotions find valuable, and the will finds doable. If we want to change our lives, we've got to stop loving and trusting things other than God. You love many things, but you do not love anything the same. Only one person or thing can be at the top. Now, who is it? And if it's not God, you're not on the path to joy and peace. You're on the path to destruction. No one can serve two masters. Who is your master? That's where we'll stop tonight. Lord willing, we just have a few more classes. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about other relationships in which we can reflect the love of God.